can take our time. So thank you and welcome everyone to this wonderful event and conversation as we embark on the eve of Veterans Day and a very important Veterans Day at that. Thank you for coming to Novato. We're so honored to be able to host this and to be able to really make this what we hope to be an annual event where we can have a conversation with veterans, we can hear from each other, we can learn from each other, and we can open up dialogue across generations to discuss experiences and talk about service and what that means to all of us. I want to first acknowledge a couple of people. I do see in the audience a couple colleagues of mine. Mayor Pro Tem Pam Drew is here with us today, and Councilwoman Pat Eklund. And then I also want to acknowledge, because unlike most of us who probably can no longer fit in our uniforms, Chief McGill, who is in uniform, and one of his colleagues with the police department. So thank you for coming and being part of this. This is something that I think is really special for our community to be able to have. Novato has such a rich tradition when it comes to service and when it comes to the military. Not only do we have Hamilton Air Force Base, where I currently get to live with my family and raise my kids on, but we have a whole community of people who have military in their blood, military in their background, but also many, many other forms of service. Many people know our community is the place where police officers and firefighters come to live and be part of our community. And there's just a rich tradition of service and giving back here that we have a chance to honor, that we get to honor every day. And so to be able to have this conversation here in Novato and have this first annual event, I think is really appropriate and special and something that we're very grateful to have. The reason we wanted to have this event, and I'll introduce shortly a couple key people for putting this together, is a recognition that one of the challenges for veterans coming back from service is a sense of isolation, and a sense of you're part of a unit for a short amount, for the time that you serve. You're in an intense environment with people around you with shared experience, and then you often come back, and especially now, but it's a common experience for veterans, into a culture that's very different, and you're thrown into a situation of people who don't have different experiences, who don't share that military experience, and so we don't often provide the opportunity for us to talk to each other and to share those experiences and to learn about and hear from people. So we wanted to provide that opportunity today to hear from members of the military, from veterans, and to learn from them, and to have them share what their experiences were like, so we can all share in that. And I think one thing that's important, really important to note in that is, and as I look around the audience, we all know, many of us, that when we talk about veterans and people who serve, that means as much the person who put on the uniform as it does their spouse or their mother or their father or their brother or their sister, who every single day of deployment served along with them in a really meaningful and important way for this country. And so today we honor, in this part of this conversation, not just those who wore the uniform, but those who served alongside the man or woman in uniform. And so that's going to be an important part of this conversation. And as I look around the audience, I see several mothers and daughters and brothers and husbands of those who've served. And so we welcome you to this conversation as well. I'm just going to explain, just talk very, very briefly, and then I'm going to have the chance to pass this on to the people who organize this wonderful conversation. My name is Josh Friday, as was said before. I have the honor of serving this year as mayor of Novato, but my greatest honor was I had the opportunity to serve our nation as a lieutenant in the United States Navy. And I've always felt very fortunate. I had a chance to grow up in Marin County. I felt very lucky to be here. In many ways, I think I won the lottery by having a chance to grow up in Marin and go to schools here. And I also had a chance to go to UC Berkeley, my dream college. And what I realized very quickly, or not quickly, throughout time, in growing up in Marin and going to college, Other than people like my Little League baseball coach and umpire, Ray Mullen, I knew very few veterans. And there are very few people that I grew up around that had military experience or whose family had military experience, and especially my experience in college. I was a junior in college when 9/11 happened, and in my generation, post 9/11, less than 1% of my generation was asked to serve or given the opportunity to serve in the longest war in our nation's history. And so one of the things that I realized was there was a disconnect, and there is a disconnect between it's often called the military-civilian divide. And so I wanted to do something that was important, that would contribute to our nation, and that would also give me a chance to feel connected to this country. And so I commissioned voluntarily as a lieutenant in the United States Navy coming out of law school. I had a chance to serve overseas in Japan for 2.5 years, where my son was born. We got to be part of the largest humanitarian aid and disaster relief effort after the earthquake and tsunami and nuclear disaster in Japan. I was sent out to sea to support the admiral overseeing the entire operation. My wife was evacuated because she was 3 months pregnant with our first son. Don't worry, he's totally fine. He glows in the dark, but he's okay other than that. And we got to experience what it was like to be part of the biggest military community in the Pacific, in Yokosuka, Japan, and be on a ship and be on a nuclear aircraft carrier. And then after I was serving in Japan, I was then ordered and assigned to serve in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where I served as a part of the military commissions in the military tribunals that are happening in Guantanamo. So I had a very diverse, I think, active duty experience. We're going to get a chance to hear from other veterans who also had different experiences throughout the country. And what I learned very briefly is that patriotism. And I've spent a lot of time reflecting about patriotism and what that means. And I actually looked it up once because I was thinking about it so much. And according to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, patriotism means love for or devotion to one's country. And I think as we have this conversation, as we share experiences and we hear from each other, it's important for us to really, I think, dig in and analyze what does it mean to love and be devoted to one's country. What does that constitute, or to one's community? And if you think about what does it mean to love and be devoted to your family or your community or your business? One of the things that I learned is through service and through my military service, the more you give back, the more you sacrifice, the more you tend to love the thing you're giving to. And that there's a relationship between between what you're giving to and what you're getting back. And I feel like I've gotten back so much more than even what I've given as a result of my service. And as a result, I love my country more. I'm devoted to my country more. And it's one of the reasons why in Novato, we've really focused on how do we provide service opportunities, not just for those who want to go into the military, but for everybody. So one of the programs that I helped launch and that our council supported this year is to create a service program for young people in Novato who want to go to college. So much like the GI Bill, where if you commit to serve your country, you're given the opportunity to go to college, we created a program, a unique program here in Novato, where if you graduate from one of the Novato high schools, you commit to serve with the city for 2 summers, and you have the grades to get into Dominican College. Dominican College will give you a $100,000 scholarship. And we have our first cohort. Thank you. We have our first cohort of students going through college right now, and we've sent the message here in Novato, like our country sent to generations of service members who serve their country, that if you're willing to serve, you're willing to give back, you're willing to be devoted to your community, to love your community, that you're going to give the opportunity to pursue your dreams. And that's what we're doing here in Novato, and we're very, very proud of that. And when I think about love of and devotion to the city of Novato and the patriotism for Novato. There's few people that come to mind that show that and really show that by her service and her enthusiasm and her sacrifice for all of us than Sylvia Berry, who had a chance. So let's give Sylvia a big round of applause. So I'm going to introduce Sylvia Berry right now, who's no stranger to service in Novato. Many of you will know her. Not only did she probably invite you today, she probably told you you had to come. You had no choice. She's president of the Rotary Club of Novato Sunrise. She's also a realtor here with Caldwell Banker. But she's a longtime resident. She's very active in community affairs here on a whole slew of issues. She's received many awards. She's gone through the Novato Leadership Program. And really this event today, the reason we're all sitting here today together celebrating veterans and celebrating our community is because of her inspiration, her vision. And she, in my mind, embodies the idea that patriotism really is about love and devotion in a way that means real sacrifice and real service to your community. So Sylvia, thank you for everything that you do for all of us, and thank you for bringing us here together today. And with that, I'm going to pass this over to you.
All right, well, thank you, Mayor Friday, for that introduction and your thoughts. Really appreciate it. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for coming today. Actually, you talk about background from a veteran and from service and as a mayor. I grew up in Taiwan, citizenship Chinese. Came here after I graduated from college, came here for graduate school, and I adopted this country. I'm a citizen of the United States, and I'm very proud of it. And I have watched how meaningful and the freedom that we have here. Just by the last election, we had so many different opinions, ideas, but we vote and we try to find out what the citizens want. So anyway, this is some freedom that we can have just by ourselves, but really through the sacrifice the veterans and the soldiers who are in service who's made to us, to our lives. So watching that really inspired, and so thank you for your service, for coming. So for our Rotary, we put out this event. As we're talking, Mayor Friday touched upon that, basically saying that we tell our veterans that we thank you for your service. But in general, as the citizens and civilians, we really don't make any effort to understand what you guys have been going through and what it really your service meant to you guys. So I think, and the best way for us to honor you guys, the service member and veterans in our community, is by providing you with the priority opportunity to tell us about your experiences and also help us to learn how to talk to veterans. We'd like to encourage all members of the community to give service yourselves. So that's the reason why we're here, to bring understanding between two civilians and the veterans and the soldiers who are in service. And today we ask Gil Sambo, who is a member of the Rotary Club of Novato Sunrise and a Novato resident, to moderate this panel. Gil has a very unique background, even though he has never served in the military. He is a civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army for Northern California, and he was appointed to that position as a result of his activities organizing his community in Connecticut to support the U.S. Army Brigade and its families. That's based in Europe. He supported them through 3 combat deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. Gil's passion to support those in uniform, which extends to first responders, began after witnessing the attacks on World Trade Center from the next building. That's where he worked. And then he watched the sacrifices of those rescue workers who responded to the attacks and gave their lives on behalf of New Yorkers like himself. When we went to war, Gil adopted soldier, and then he adopted a whole platoon, and then a 4,300 soldier brigade, the families and the wounded soldiers. So we're fortunately that Gil moved to Novato, so here he is. And he's going to help us to bridge the gap and serve soldiers and the veterans. Please welcome Gil Sample.
Thank you very much for all of you coming to this event today. To start out with, I want to recognize a couple of people. First, Ray Mullen over to my left, who's president of the Marin County United Veterans Council, and he will be leading the ceremonies tomorrow down at the Marin County Auditorium, starting at 9 o'clock. So I encourage all of you to attend. I went there last year. Unfortunately, I've got to go into San Francisco for their activities tomorrow, but it's a very robust and I think meaningful event. I also like to thank everyone who helped set up today, particularly Judy Johnson from our club, who is responsible for all these decorations, and Harry, whom you'll meet in a minute, responsible for the refreshments this morning. So the second thing I'd like to do is to recognize all those veterans attending today. Please stand up and accept our appreciation. The third thing I'd like to do today, which is November 10th, is wish the Marine Corps a happy birthday. So happy birthday, Marines, Semper Fi. I'd like to make a few comments as to why we think this dialogue is important. Josh mentioned the civilian-military divide. I'm part of that divide on the 99% that hasn't served and not part of the active military. But as Sylvia mentioned, my life changed on 9/11 because of what I witnessed there on that day. And I was in Three World Financial Center next to the North Tower when at 8:46 in the morning I felt our building shake. I heard a tremendous explosion. We had no idea what it was, and then a few minutes or a few seconds later, somebody came running and said the World Trade Center was on fire. So as we were watching that building on fire with the people inside scrambling to try to get out, we saw a plane hit the South Tower coming in from the right and then saw the fireball go out the north side of the building. And at that very instance, where we were totally bewildered about what had happened, we instantaneously knew that we were under attack, and we thought our building was next. When we all evacuated and were out in front of the World Trade Center, just fearing for our lives, I heard the noise of an aircraft approaching from behind me. And I went from fearing for my life to this overall sensation that I had heard before, I'd felt in my chest before. It was an F-15 that came screaming over the city, and I'd heard that sound many times before, and I knew that that F-15 had come from Otis Air National Guard Base on the Cape because I had a house on Martha's Vineyard, and I used to hear those aircraft flying over, and every time I did, I would go out on my deck to watch them. At that point in time, I knew that I and the city of New York was safe. And as I've said to literally hundreds of people in talking about my experiences that day and why I began to support our men and women in uniform, I understood for the first time in my life what it meant to have the military at my back. I witnessed hundreds of people going into those buildings and not coming out. And when we went to war, I believed that I should support soldiers. So, as Sylvia said, I adopted a soldier and then a platoon. and then I wanted something bigger. I didn't know I was going to get a 4,300 soldier brigade based in Germany, but it was a life-changing experience for me. And I realized that I needed a community support. So I organized my entire community in Weston, Connecticut to support the soldiers, the families, and then the wounded soldiers coming back. And I haven't looked back since. In addition, I've always supported a platoon, so I wanted that grounding. I wanted that connection to soldiers in combat. So I just finished supporting my 20th platoon since 9/11, and obviously looking for my next platoon. In fact, our club has adopted the unit of the son of one of our members, so it connects us with those soldiers who are out in harm's way on our behalf. What we have today is a panel of folks representing a cross-section of wars and perspectives. And what we will do is we'll have each of these panelists talk about their experiences. I'll ask a few questions, and then for all of them, we'll open it up to the audience. As Sylvia indicated, we oftentimes say, thank you for your service, and we really don't know what that means. In fact, a couple of years ago, I read an article in the New York Times entitled, "Please Don't Thank Me for My Service." And it was written by an Army veteran, and it was basically a plea for us as civilians to get to understand what that service is, and then also to exercise the rights that we have earned on the battlefield as citizens to read what we want to, express our opinions, to vote, and to hold our elected officials accountable for all of the decisions that are made leading up to a commitment of our soldiers and Marines, airmen, coasties, sailors into harm's way. That's on us as civilians. So really to start that off, we felt let's open this dialogue here in the city of Novato. Before I turn it over to the next panelist, I want to address something that really came in front of us this week, and that was the attacks down in Southern California, and the news headlines that this was a Marine suffering from PTSD, and that's what gave rise to the attacks. The comment in that incident provoked a lot of comments among my 300 plus friends on Facebook, 90% of whom are military. And I want to read one comment by a sergeant that I've gotten to know. She served 27 years in the Army, did 3 combat tours. She made the simple statement, "I am terribly saddened by the mass shooting in California. However, not every single vet who has seen combat and has PTSD is going to or has ever thought about killing others. Do not be afraid of us all." And I think we have to take that to heart. I think we need to understand more about the effects of combat, but we also have to recognize that 99% of those who serve come back, and they are active contributing members of families in our society. We have to address those who suffer, whether silently or in public, from the effects of combat. But I think we cannot, as a society, generalize from experiences like that. So with that, let me make my first introduction. And this is a gentleman that I met when I gave the keynote address up at the Napa 9/11 ceremony a couple of months ago. And afterwards, this tall gentleman came up to me. He had a veteran's cap on. I looked at him. I didn't look at the cap. And he introduced himself. And he said, "I was a survivor at Pearl Harbor." The two events of 9/11 and Pearl Harbor, I think, will stand out in history as monumental events for us. I had never met a Pearl Harbor survivor, and it literally staggered me. He then proceeded to tell me that although he was a witness and survivor of Pearl Harbor, it was nothing like what I had gone through. And like every veteran that I've talked to, I knew that wasn't correct. And so I went online and I did some research on Commander Long. And I discovered that he had a 22-year career in the Navy that was really started when he joined the Navy from Minnesota, a town of, I think, a population of 283, including the animals in that city, and then found himself on a PBY when the Japanese hit. His story is so poignant, I felt, even though he's not a member of our community, I wanted to embrace him and bring him here to really give us a perspective of how World War II began for us and what his personal experiences were and how what they meant to him during his life. So what I want to do is to turn it over to Commander Don Long from Napa. You just hold on to that. Yeah.
Thank you, Gil. First of all, I would just like to put little ditto marks, quote marks, and say that I will not say many of the things that he just said about 9/11, Pearl Harbor, our thoughts about what happened to our nation at that time, etc. You heard it from him, eloquently stated, and I will immediately go into my little tale of those many years ago. It's going to be 77, I guess, here in a few days, a month or so. Yes, I was at Pearl Harbor. I joined the Navy 1941, March, and like he stated, a little town, Minnesota, population 283, including livestock, and went to training at Great Lakes, Illinois. And immediately after that, I was fortunate enough to be ordered to a radio school in Alameda, California, when the base first opened. I believe it was June of 1941. I completed the radio school training there, and it was my job in the Navy was hopeful to be a radioman either on board ship or specializing in aircraft, which I fortunately was able to do. Immediately following that, in, I believe it was October or so of 1941, we got orders from radio school, and I, with a big smile on my face, was sent to Hawaii. Many of us from Minnesota, Hawaii still is a paradise. It's getting cold and snowy up there. Hawaii, I'm sure. The palm trees are still waving and the flowers are still blooming. But anyway, I did get to Hawaii in November of 1941. Was assigned to a squadron, VP-12, squadron of old PBYs. The PBYs, for those of you might recall, that it was the one airplanes that we had were not amphibious. They only landed on the water. That, I guess that makes them amphibious. Well, anyway, they had no wheels on them, the early airplanes. I was assigned there in November of 1941, and on that fateful day of December 7th, my section in the squadron, we had the duty that at no liberty, and my job that day, I was assigned to be aboard a plane that we had anchored on the water. It was a popular custom procedure in the squadron that often planes were left on the water as a ready plane or for some reason, and someone was always aboard the plane just for safeguarding, safekeeping purposes, a leak, something drifting. The morning was typical, beautiful Hawaiian Sunday morning, everything quiet. I went down to the boathouse a little after 7. They put me on a boat and took me out to the airplane. There were 3 or 4 other airplanes on the bay at the time. We had relieved all the other guys first and came over to the plane that I was to be on, the plane guard on for the day. The fellow that I relieved said everything's okay. They shoved off in the boat and went back to shore. A few minutes later, now by a few minutes, this is about 7:45 in the morning, just a little bit before 8, I heard some noises, looked around, and saw some planes off in the distance, assumed it was the Army Air Corps up doing some maneuvers. Sunday, oh, a little odd, but odd things happen in the military, believe me. I went back for a moment to get ready to take care of my daily chores on the airplane, which was to be partially, I was planning to send signals between myself and the shore people in the tower at the air station, and we were practicing signal lights and flags, waving flag semaphore and things like that. That was our plan for the day. Well, it never did happen. A few minutes later, I heard a noise and started looking around, saw the planes that were coming in, looked like they were diving. Moments later, one of the planes, a few hundred yards from me, burst into flame, that he had been shot on a strafing run. Well, that kind of changed the situation for the day for me. And almost immediately, bombs began to fall on the hangars. There were loud explosions, fires. And momentarily after that time, I can't tell you, but I imagine less than a minute, that a plane, I got up into the pilot's cockpit, looked at the pilot's compartment, looked out, and saw that planes were coming in my direction. Seconds later, there was machine gun fire. I saw the tracer bullets coming down. My plane was hit and engulfed in flame. I was up in the pilot's compartment, which is in front of the plane. The escape hatch on that thing is in the back. They have a little window up there for the pilot to get out, but it's kind of small, and so that normally you got aboard and exited from the big blisters in the back, if any of you are familiar with the plane. But that was the way we usually got out. As I was going back through, the plane was burning at this time and whatnot. I could recall seeing little spurts of water coming up through the bottom of the airplane. There was no floor per se, just the bottom itself, and the water came up. The plane was engulfed in flames at that time, and of course, all I was thinking is, get out of here. I got back to the blister. It had been still left open, I'm sure, from when I got aboard in the morning, and got ready to jump out. By that time, the plane was engulfed in flames. There was flames and oil and gas burning on the water, and just like you see in some of the movies, that the plane in the middle of a ball of fire. But fortunately, they had at boot camp taught us about how to swim through burning water, so to speak, and that knowledge came back to me very quickly, believe me, and I jumped into the water. The procedure, incidentally, that I trust none of you will ever have the opportunity to use it, but it's quite simple, fortunately, that what one does, jump in, first of all, feet first, don't dive, and then go down and stay under the water. Of course, there's no fire under there. Then when you feel the need for a breath, you come up and with both hands, just raise them above your head and just swish the water around away from your head. It forms a little pocket where there is no fire. You just come up, take a couple of quick gulps, and go back down again and swim a little bit more. I had to do this 2, 3, 4 times, and then I was outside of that area. The attack, of course, was still going on. All of the other planes on the water, I said there were 3 or 4 of us, were all burning or sunk by that time. Some of the hangars were ablaze on the shore, still bombing and attack going on the shore. That tried to analyze what to do. I first thought I might be strafed. I saw a buoy 100, 200 yards away, and I thought if I got over to that buoy, maybe the base of the buoy is such that I could get under it. I swam over there, and it was a buoy built on 6x6s or so, and I figured if a plane came toward me, I could dive under that thing, and machine gun bullets, I didn't think it'd go through it. That part never happened. At no time was I ever aware of any attack made at me personally. Aircraft, yeah. One of the things oddity that I recall is while swimming, I had on regulation high-top shoes and stuff, very difficult to swim. And I took those things off while in the water and swam on over. I was on that buoy for another, half an hour, hour and a half while the attack second wave came in, and they just continued more of the same procedure on the shoreline, the bombing and stuff. And then finally, when the attack was over, that I was just standing there looking, trying to get my thoughts together, but a boat came out, and they were looking for survivors. They came over and picked me up, and unfortunately, I was the only one that was picked up. The other guys were lost. They washed ashore the next day, as I recall. And that was really it. That was they took me ashore. They hauled me off over to sickbay right away. There were some serious casualties. I was kind of put on hold. My burns were all superficial, and so I waited for an hour or two for treatment. They did just a treatment for slight burns and gave me a tag, and later that afternoon I was released from duty. Thus ended, well, it didn't end the day, but it ended the attack on Pearl Harbor, and I will turn this back to Gil unless you have a specific question.
Sir, you spent 22 years in the Navy. Perhaps you could comment on your experience and what it did for you in later life as a civilian.
Well, of course, I've got to go a little bit into my naval experiences of why I stayed in. That after Pearl Harbor, that I went out to the Southwest Pacific and was in action at Guadalcanal, Espiritu Santos. We were based out of Fiji at that time, and during that period, that I got orders to go to flight school. I did. I went to flight school in 1943, got my wings, got married, and then they kept me in the States for a while as a flight instructor. When the war ended, I was in Lake City, Florida as a flight instructor. And of course, this now comes the decision, what do I do? Do I get out? I certainly had enough points and stuff to get out. But the wife and I talked it all over. And for a little kid off the farm, still had a little cow manure on his shoes, that maybe this Navy is a pretty good deal. I had gone from all the way up through the ranks. I was now a commissioned officer, and we decided we would stay in the service. During my service time, I had some very, very interesting experiences aboard ship. I think, most rewarding tour of duty was probably as the test director at the Naval Parachute Unit in El Centro, California, where at this time, now we're talking late 50s, that we were working on recovery programs for the space program, parachute things, releases, getting the capsules down, that sort of thing. That we had many contacts with the people in the Air Force up at Edwards, and this was certainly a very rewarding experience. That spent some time aboard various ships in Western Pacific, and then finally at the end of my tour, this was the Cold War period now, the squadron was basically up in Newfoundland. We were flying these old Constellations, these three-tailed jobbies with the big radar on the top and the bottom, and it was what they called the dew-line extension. We had radars around the upper perimeter of the globe to theoretically know what the Russians were doing, but across the Atlantic, we had picket ships out there, and then we had aircraft from our squadrons that were flying basically between Iceland and Newfoundland and down to the Azores and covering that area of the Atlantic, where in theory anyway, we could detect any unidentified aircraft that were coming over from that direction. I got out of the Navy in 1962. I was part of what was known as the hump, and that is they trained too many pilots too many officers. We didn't all get promoted. They had or killed, because that's what the attrition rate was expected to be higher than it was. And so there was always a bunch of us always, I'll say, sweating for the next promotion. I did finally get up to the rank of captain, of commander, but for me to get to be a captain, non-academy, the odds were pretty slim. The wife and I decided that for our family and all things for us, that this was the time to get out. I knew I would have to do something else after I got out. And I, very briefly, went back to college, taught school for a number of years, about 15 years. After that, quit that, ran a fishing boat from San Diego down into Mexico, Cabo San Lucas, a good fun job. And I always have had a very tender spot in my heart, of course, for the Navy. Quit on an up stroke.
My next panelist is Novato's very own Harry Thomas. Harry actually was born in Marin and has lived in Marin, his experience in the Army his whole life, and has been a citizen here in Novato for a number of years. He served in the U.S. Army from 1966 to 69, which was during a period, as we all know, of great upheaval, social upheaval, political upheaval, and terrific controversy around the Vietnam War. He deployed to Vietnam and was based in Da Nang, actually during the Tet Offensive, which most of us know about. He moved to Novato in 1975, worked in the financial sector for his career, had a stint as a teacher along the way, and then retired in 2010. Like many of those who've served that I've come to know over the years, Harry continued his service locally among various activities. He's an active member of the Rotary Club of Novato Sunrise, served as its president in 2010 and 2011. Along the way, Harry wrote a book, and I shamelessly promote his book, called Two Tours. And it's about his experience in Vietnam and also his experience returning to Vietnam many years later. But as I talked to him the other night about this book, it's also a love story about his relationship and then marriage to his lovely wife, Lauren. So I encourage all of you to read this book. It's heartwarming, it's gut-wrenching at times, but it's a terrific, really expose and personal diary of his experience. So let me turn it over to Harry Thomas.
Thank you very much, Gil. I represent the veterans of Vietnam, some 58,000 who did not return and several 100,000 who were wounded, and the weight of that is heavy on me. I did serve in Vietnam. I served in the Army Signal Corps, the only Army at the time in what was called I Corps on Da Nang Air Base. And with the Marines, please stand. The Marines, veterans, please. You guys guarded my behind for the entire time I was there and guarded that air base for many years. Thank you so much. I'll buy you all a beer or more. Now, despite their efforts, it was an asymmetric war, and the base that I served in was a clear, obvious target. It had huge antennas. It was next to the Da Nang Air Base, and we were frequently targeted and hit by 140 millimeter rockets. That was one of those wars where, despite the best efforts of the Marines and the Army in the south of Vietnam, that the enemy could still attack at will. And over the course of my year there, from my beginnings in January of 1967, we experienced the first rocket attack in Da Nang, the first one that did damage. Da Nang had been damaged by small mortars, but my third night there, we were attacked, my base specifically, with 10 or 12 rounds of 140 millimeter rockets that killed many of my colleagues. And from there on, through the rest of my tour, those attacks continued to increase, not only in frequency, but in severity, culminating in the Tet Offensive in 1968, which was a countrywide attack on all the major bases and provincial capitals of Vietnam. And after that, a few weeks later, I was released from my requirements to serve in Vietnam and came home, had a month's leave, and was sent to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for the balance of my time, which was another year. I was drafted, and after a week of boot camp, they asked me if I wanted to take an additional year and pick my specialty. And I did. I did it honestly to not be in the infantry. And I decided that I would do signal work, and I became a repairman of radios. Coming home was difficult. I don't know quite how to explain it. Some of you have some sense of what the times were. People have recently come up to me and said, well, welcome home. This is in the last 4 or 5 years. And I don't know quite how to take it because I've been home for quite some time. Well, let's talk about home. What is home? If you were at war, home is a place of comfort where you're supposed to be cherished and nourished. And certainly coming home, my family, my brothers, all did that. My country at the time did not. And I don't know that I take it personally, but I feel badly for all who did serve at that time that was the case. I did write a book. Let me explain why I wrote the book. Because it was, but I'll have to tell you when I came home. I survived the war, and I came back to a nation in turmoil, much like what it is today, maybe worse. And I lived through 1968, which was the assassination of Martin Luther King, the assassination of Bobby Kennedy, the Chicago riots for the Democratic Convention. It was a hellacious year of turmoil. The good news is I was married that year, and I remind my wife often what a blessing she was during that time. And then I went back to college, and I got a degree, and my wife got her RN, and she was stationed at Travis Air Force Base when the first veterans, prisoners of war, were released, and she saw them come home through Travis and cared for some of them. I remember the Kent State event where people my age were in the service of the National Guard shooting people my age. That was very upsetting. And I went through all this with trepidation and concern, and I tried really hard to understand it. It's very hard to understand. So I started reading, and I read everything I could put my hands on about the particular war I was in. I have a bibliography in my back, and there's some wonderful books. There are more being written now, and PBS, Public Television, did a multiple-hour series on the war that is very, very wonderful, very interesting if you can last through the whole thing. It's a very complicated war. So I went through all that, and then, because I'm a member of a Rotary Club, I was elected president, and the presidents in our club are paid. They pay you to go to the International Rotary Convention. And in the year I was elected, it was in Bangkok, Thailand. So I said to my wife, hey, I get to go to Thailand. And she said, well, that's great. For how long? And I said, well, it's a 3 or 4 day convention. And she said, well, that's ridiculous. Too far to fly for that short of time. Why don't you go back to Vietnam? And I went, oh, I don't know about that. And anyway, she convinced me, And there was a Rotary tour prior to the convention, led by a wonderful travel agency that all Rotarians. And we signed up for it, along with my daughter, and we went back. And the first stop was Hanoi. And that was mind-blowing. I never, in my entire life, having been under fire and lost colleagues in a war in South Vietnam, thought I'd ever set foot in Hanoi. And there I was. And we went from there to Hue, the site of the worst of the fighting in the Tet Offensive, to Phu Bai, where we had a signal base, back to Da Nang, where I had been, and then down to Hoi An, and then Saigon and the Mekong Delta. And I found a country at peace. I found a country, I'm not going to go into all of it, it's very wonderfully cathartic. But while I was there, I was in Hue, in a beautiful hotel, which was formerly the University of Hue that was attacked heavily during the Tet Offensive and had been restored. And I was in the swimming pool. The climate in Vietnam sucks. It's hot and humid and it's sweaty. I was in the pool with other Rotarians after a long day of touring. And on the wall up above the hotel, it said, this building was built in 1906, I think it said, or 1916. And one of them turned to me and said, "Did this hotel survive the war?" And I said, "Well, yes, but it was in the Tet Offensive. It's been restored." And then, now these are people my age. I look around, most of our age. And then this wonderful, educated person said to me, "How did we get into this war anyway?" And it hurt deeply. And so I took a deep breath, and then I started to go through everything I'd read, explaining it. And I was in the pool with these folks. There are people like you there for 45 minutes talking about how we got there, what happened. And when I got out, I was badly sunburned. And I came home some weeks later. I had already written my memoirs of the war for my family. And I thought, well, I can't stop there. I've got to tell my daughter, well, she was with me, tell my nieces, my nephews, the young people of the country what happened and why, because it's not well understood. Even my peers have a vague understanding of how we got there. So I will say the following things in conclusion. To honor us as veterans, it's kind of you to say, welcome home. It feels a little late sometimes. It's kind of you to say thank you, and it is appreciated. But what you can do for us to really honor us is be informed, educated voters. Be informed. Don't just go vote. I'll tell you one quick story. I married an Italian girl, great Italian family, and they argue for fun, truly. And one Christmas, they were arguing over whether you pronounce a gondola, as you find in Venice, gondola or gondola. It's gondola. No, it's gondola. It's gondola. And I'm sitting there, I'm an Irish quiet kid, wondering what the hell's going on. And my wife's cousin turned to me and said, "Well, what is it, gondola or gondola?" And I said, "I really don't know." And she said, "You have to have an opinion." And I said, "Okay, well, we've always said gondola in my family." And she turned to me and said, "No, it's gondola." Well, as voting informed citizens, you have to have an opinion. You have to have that opinion. You owe it to all of us who are veterans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harry. My third panelist, and you'll see we're really crossing generations in crossing eras here, is the gentleman to my left, Captain T.J. O'Malley of the United States Army. Captain O'Malley lives up in Petaluma. He was born and raised in Massachusetts, as was I, and therefore he's an insufferable fan to all Boston sports teams, as am I. I see a few other fans in the background. He began his service in 2010 when he was commissioned as a second lieutenant out of Norwich University. Served a combat tour in Iraq. He was awarded the Bronze Star, the Army Commendation Medal with Oak Leaf Cluster, and even a medal from the German Armed Forces. I could continue to go through all the other medals, but it would take the rest of the session this morning. He now serves as a commander of the North Bay Recruiting Company based in Santa Rosa. And I asked him to come to really talk about his service in a different era, and also what it's like to be a soldier in uniform out in a civilian community today. And I may ask him some questions about that to the extent that he isn't as forthcoming as I might want him to be. But he's now become a great friend. We rise and fall on the travails of our teams in Boston. But we're doing pretty well this fall. So let me turn it over to Captain O'Malley.
Thank you, Gil. My peers, fellow veterans, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Great show of support. When Gil first asked me to come down here, I was like, well, what do you want me to talk about? You've got a Pearl Harbor survivor. You've got these, men and women who served honorably from all these other conflicts. I don't really think I've done that much, but apparently Gil does, so that works for me. So here I am. I've had an amazingly diverse career serving as a military police officer. In my tour in Iraq, I always knew I wanted to serve. My father was a Vietnam Navy veteran. My grandfather was an Army medic in the Pacific in World War II. So service is just kind of in my family. So it was always assured that I'd join the military at some point, to my mother's disdain. She still thinks, I should go to law school and quit all this uniform running around stuff. Don't think it's going to happen. Knew I was going to serve, and I really figured out why I was serving in Iraq. And at that time, I found myself a platoon leader of approximately 45 soldiers, sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, husbands, wives. And I had two chief concerns, and one was just bring all of them home alive and not have to write any letters to their families explaining that I had been the reason for someone's loved one not coming home. And we used to do missions looking for IEDs. We do missions in support of other units at taking enemy contact. But the coolest mission I ever got to do was we got to go to a school. And we picked this particular school because it was one of the few in the area that had female students as well as male students. And it was completely desegregated. There was no boys in this classroom, girls in this classroom, and they let the girls go to school. And we had all these school kits with colored pencils and books and school supplies for these students that they had never seen before. And we spent the day giving out school supplies to these kids and seeing the opportunity, especially for the young women there, to actually go to school and be given that chance to learn. That was, for me, when I was like, all right, now I kind of know what I'm doing here. This is, I can feel good about this. And I've continued my service. I was lucky enough, the Army sent me to some cool places. I got to live in Alaska for 2 years. Loved that assignment. And then after that, they said, hey, you're going to go to Sonoma County and live in wine country. And I was like, okay, it's like getting stationed in Hawaii. I was like, they can send me way worse places. So here I am, been here for about a year. About 30 days after I got here last year was when the fires last year. So it's ironic to me with the smoke in the air today. 2 of my own soldiers in my company lost their homes last year. But seeing the way that a community can come together, regardless of veteran, non-veteran, anybody at all, really, just in a time of crisis for their neighbors to their left and their right. That's why I enjoy what I do, and the ability to serve, at the privilege of the citizens of our great nation.
Captain O'Malley and his soldiers who were spread out across Northern California here from the North Bay on up obviously operate in a challenging environment. And part of that dynamic is how somebody in uniform is received or not received in their communities. I was in D.C. when the fires broke out at the annual Army convention last year, and in knowing that we had 2 soldiers who got burned out, made my way back as soon as I could, and then immediately went up to Santa Rosa to see how I could help. And as I was there, a sergeant came in from the building. She'd been volunteering all day, as had all of Captain O'Malley's soldiers. And she said to me, "Sir, this is the first time I've felt good about wearing my uniform in the community." I was so taken aback by that, but also reflective of what that meant. And what it means is that we may have really uneducated views about those who serve. We may have political biases, etc. But when it comes to an emergency, when it comes to the need for help, the people that we derive the most comfort from are those in uniform. And actually, after attending the services for a Novato native who died in the line of duty as a deputy sheriff for Marin, I wrote an op-ed for the MIJ last spring called "Our Awesome Duty." And to me, what we as citizens need to understand is our responsibilities as citizens to support anybody in uniform. What I do as a civilian aide is to try to bridge the gap, and I start with educating people about national security issues that are highly complex, highly controversial, and then obviously talk about the role of the military in executing the policies that we as a nation derive around those national security challenges. So what I find challenging, and something that really is on us, is to how to turn that attitude that so often gets exhibited out in the community toward those in uniform in a positive direction. To me, the best thing is actually get to know them personally, because you'll find, as I have found over the years since I've been involved, they're people just like us. They have the same values, the same desires, but they do have an element of service here that not all of us follow. So with that, maybe you could talk about the challenges you've had actually coming off of an Army support network. Most people who go into recruiting come off of posts, and that's a difficult transition to find yourself out in a community by yourself. Maybe you could chat a little bit about that and how you yourself have dealt with it, and how you work with your fellow soldiers to get the camaraderie that oftentimes is lost when you get out into a civilian community.
Sure. So as Gil stated, we operate in a very geographically dispersed environment. So my particular company, we cover 8,600 square miles, 7 recruiting stations, including one right around the corner here in Novato, with about 42 soldiers responsible for recruiting for the Army and Army Reserve. And what most families in the military are used to, and I'm sure many of the veterans here can attest to, is that on any military installation, you have an intense support network of just your basic health care, counselors, child care services, anything a military family could need to ensure that their needs are met, that the service member can carry out their duty with the safety of knowing that the family is taken care of, whether they're in the field, whether they're in a deployed environment, working long weekends, things like that. Husband, wife, children, they're taken care of. They have everything they could possibly need. And it can be very challenging out here, because in those type of situations, the spouses, we refer to a family, we call a family readiness group, an FRG, and it's an opportunity for all the spouses to get together, all the family members to get together, and even just to have a potluck and be around people that are going through the same experience. Hey, yeah, your husband's gone, my wife's gone, your husband, brother, son, like I said before, and it's difficult to have that here. Again, I have to drive 2 hours to get to some of my stations, and it's interesting trying to involve the families, trying to find events, find locations, things like that, where we can all come together. And recruiting is a 24/7 mission for us. So in a normal Army unit, you train up, either go do a deployment or go do a big exercise, come back, and then you get a couple weeks off to just kind of relax and lay low and spend time with your family. And unfortunately for us in recruiting, when one mission ends at the end of a year, the next one starts the next day. So it's a little tough for us to pull in and give a few dedicated days to really nurturing the families and things like that. But it's been challenging, but it's also unique in that, we can have events in these beautiful areas. Again, I go back to this beautiful area we're afforded the opportunity to live in. We can have events at these gorgeous wineries and things like that instead of just a random dank hall on a base somewhere. But it's challenging for families to be away from that support structure, to be away from those who know what they're going through, who can be compassionate and understanding because they've been through the same thing or are going through the same thing. It's difficult, but they make do. We do have all the services available on Travis Air Force Base, and we receive funding a few times a year from our headquarters to host a winter party, a summer party, and again just to bring everybody in and really. But it can be challenging. It can be extremely challenging to be in a community that doesn't understand why your soldiers working late nights, why they're working weekends. The odd hours seem to get to people that it's not just a 9 to 5, that if something happens to one of my soldiers' family, it could be Sunday at church, and I've got to answer the phone. I have the privilege of carrying 2 cell phones with me wherever I go. I'll be lucky to give up that leash at some point. But it's interesting. I speak with my wife about what goes on with her employees. She's a manager for an airline. What happens to her employees off the clock really doesn't affect her daily life. It does affect mine. It does affect my peers if something happens to our soldiers, because we have to be there to support them. And that's kind of the biggest thing, is finding ways to do that when we don't necessarily have all the resources that we normally would have at our disposal.
Thank you, TJ. My final panelist is Barbara Bachner, a resident of Marin County, who's known as a Blue Star mother, and she'll explain that in more detail, but it means that she has at least one child in the military, and in her case, she's had 2 children, a son and a daughter, both of whom have gone through the Naval Academy. Her son is still serving as a Navy SEAL with multiple deployments. And Barbara's also a president of the Blue Star Mothers of Marin, which is an organization, as she'll talk about, dedicated to really providing 2 things: peer support, but also opportunities for us as civilians to help them support those who deployed. As Sylvia mentioned, I think the reason why we felt it important for her to participate is that few of us really understand what the impact is to family members when a son or a daughter or a parent or a spouse is a member of the military, particularly when they deploy. And I don't know if you're aware of it, but Chief McGill's son is going through boot camp at Fort Benning as we speak, so he can relate to this very closely. When I adopted the Dagger Brigade in Europe, one of the reasons why this my assistant's dad, who was a 3-star in the Army, to whom I went looking for a unit, directed me to that brigade was that the families were far from home, 3,000, 4,000 miles away from their basis of support. And because of my ignorance about the military, I really hadn't thought about families vis-a-vis combat deployments. I was just focused on soldiers. But it was a tremendous education to me when I went over there to learn what they were experiencing and to recognize that our community support was as important, if not more important, to those spouses, to those family members as it was to the soldiers deployed. Before 9/11, I didn't know one person in the military, and today I've got 400 plus friends. Probably 300 of them are members of the military or family members, etc. A number of them are Blue Star moms, and a couple of years ago, one of them wrote on Facebook something that I wanted to read to you. Being the mom of a deployed soldier in Afghanistan is harder than I could ever have imagined. So many lives lost in what feels like a never-ending war, and even more wounded and scarred by their experience there. Every time there is a communication blackout, you pray it's not your child. But in doing that, you are praying it's someone else's child. As this deployment draws to a close and we can finally see the end of its near, I think about the next set of soldiers taking their place. I know it is their time and it's their job, but I wish none of them had to do it. So when you hug your child tonight or consider the freedoms you have, remember the sacrifice of those who are doing the job to allow you to have what you have, and remember their families who miss them dearly. Not too long after I was appointed as a CASA in Connecticut, I attended an event with new recruits in New Haven. And during that, I made a few comments. And the mom of an 18-year-old high school graduate came up to me with tears in her eyes, and she said, "Is my son going to be okay?" And at that point, I realized that even though my card says civilian aid to the Secretary of the Army, which says I report to him, I don't really report to him. I report to that mom. I report to Chief McGill. I report to Barbara. Because in my role, what I feel compelled to do is to educate all of us about the importance of what Harry talked about, which is being informed and then exercising our rights as citizens to make sure we exhaust every opportunity outside of deploying troops before we take that action. And when we do take that action, that our troops are well-equipped, trained, and well-led. That's what I feel my responsibility is. Apologies to the Secretary if he sees this, but I report to the moms and dads. So with that, let me turn it over to Barbara.
Hello. As Gil said, I'm Barbara Bachner. I am currently the president of the Blue Star Moms of Marin. My husband and I have lived in Marin County since 1985. Our kids were born and raised here, went to high school here. And as he said, they both chose, our daughter's the older one. She's the one who came up with the idea of going to the Naval Academy and being a naval officer. And she did that, and her younger brother ended up following suit. And in 2009, I really wanted to find an organization that would be sending care packages, not obviously to my kids, but to people that were deployed. And I read about it in the IJ. I read about the Blue Star Moms of Marin, started by my very good friend, also named Barb. It's been a wonderful opportunity, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about not so much what we do in the Blue Star Moms. At the end, I'll tell you a little bit about the program itself, but I want to just give some perspective. I'm just one person with two kids who happen to have served in the military. My good friend Janice and fellow Blue Star mom is here with her grandson Braden, and she, in a few minutes, is going to tell you about her current experience as a family member and a mom of somebody who's currently deployed. So I think at this point I will, and I guess I meant to say initially, and I just appreciate the words of the fellow panelists. I feel privileged to be here. This experience of working with veterans and sending care packages to deployed soldiers has been just an amazingly worthwhile experience. I've gotten much more out of it than we have managed to do. But I will hand the fancy microphone to Janice, and I'm sure if Braden wants to say something. Do you want to come up here? You want to come up, Braden? Okay. So just don't grab that thing.
Okay. Hi, I'm Janice Cunningham. I've been born and raised here, and I raised my children here. And I am now raising my grandson. My son is currently deployed, and deployment for us means we have to have support for him. And that means my sister, my mom, my friends, my family, my son's friends come and take him. So that's basically, there is no support when it comes to the military here. It's just family. So deployment in Novato is scarce because there isn't that many families that are deployed at this time that live in Novato. And I became a Blue Star mom because I needed to talk to other women that had children that were deployed. And it is a hard thing. This is my son's second tour. And currently, we're halfway through it, so soon he'll be back, and he can take over most of the reins, but we do work as a family, and I have the great support of my community and my family, so I want to thank Nevada for that.
Thank you, Janice. And I will say that if you want somebody to help you do something like come and help us coordinate a care packing with another organization, you ask a busy person. Janice works full-time, and she has a lot of other things going on, and primarily the additional care of Braden, and she steps up all the time, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. I wanted to speak about my husband and my experience, or my experience primarily, because I kind of put the thoughts down, but I first want to read a couple of things. I've asked a couple of Blue Star Mom friends to give me their thoughts so you could hear more than just our perspective here. So this comes from my co-president, we've been co-president together, and the founder of the organization, and I'm just going to read to you what she wrote. She's not here today because she's babysitting with her son who is currently deployed. He is also a Navy SEAL, and he has 2 children, and he just left on deployment to a not particularly friendly place, and it's going to be really tough. And his wife works full time, and this is, as Janice says, a family affair to try and bring support to everybody. But this is what Barb wrote. I am personally down here taking care of a family whose son, husband, and daddy is deployed. Holidays will be exceptionally difficult with these young boys, and mommy is working full-time. Extended family is important, but not the same as daddy. Plus, the worry about his safety weighs on all of us all day, every day. And then the other is a slightly longer, this is an amazing woman. She is the wife of a career Army helicopter pilot who served in all the Middle Eastern wars, and the mother of 3 kids, and all of whom, a daughter and 2 sons, all of whom have served in combat. And so these are her words. And she's also been a full-time mom, working mom through this. Being the wife, mother, and aunt of soldiers and a Marine during a war is probably one of the hardest things you can imagine. Your day begins and ends with thoughts of, will I get a call or knock on the door to inform me that one of my loved ones has been hurt or killed? No matter how you occupy your mind or what you are doing, the thought is always there in the background, trying to push its way to the forefront of your mind. Friends try to comfort you, strangers ask how you do it, but only family and those who are in the same place can truly understand the fear could easily overtake you. My first experience with this was having my husband deployed in the first Gulf War. We were stationed overseas in Germany, no family, and only the other wives whose husbands were also deployed to lean on. We had 3 young children and little or no communication with our spouses. It was definitely not like today with almost instant communication. During this deployment, I was so wrapped up in our children, my job, and supporting other wives and families that there wasn't much time to think about him being gone. It's just the way it was. However, when your children grow up and follow in their father's footsteps, literally end up fighting in war, your perspective changes. In my case, my husband and our oldest son were deployed at the same time in Iraq. The next 2, son and daughter, would deploy a year later with their cousins and our future son-in-law. This went on for 7 years, with somebody in the family always gone. The stress can become unbearable, but having at least some of my family home gave me the strength and courage that it would all be okay. During our youngest son's second deployment, he was shot on the same day as his older brother was staged to come home. What a nightmare that was. As we were being informed by phone call, our oldest son was trying to get to his brother. This was next to impossible as the injured were moved so quickly back to Germany. The timing wouldn't work. Hence, they didn't see each other until they were both back in the U.S., and our oldest had no way of knowing how his brother was doing. Trying to explain to somebody who hasn't experienced a phone call like that what it does to you or how it makes you feel is really tough. People really don't know what to say or how to react. Many just nod their heads and walk away or utter inane platitudes that make no sense. What you really want is someone to just quietly listen, to share your moment of pain, and maybe give you a hug. I'm happy to say that he is recovered and is doing very well. These days are almost over now, with only a son-in-law currently in the active army, but his day is coming and he will deploy again, leaving our daughter and 4 children behind. I know what this is like. She's an amazing woman. I mean, she was the principal of the Timothy Murphy School. She has a master's in special education. She's really an amazing woman, and one of the original founding members of the Blue Star Moms of Marin. You can see she's a 3-star Blue Star Mom. So I usually can speak extemporaneously, but I thought I would write. So I wrote some thoughts last night, and I had my husband read it, and he added some thoughts. But these are just thoughts from a mom. But as Gil said, we have 2 kids, and they both ended up going to the Naval Academy, which I'm not sure quite how that happened. We have military in our family. My father, who unfortunately passed away before my kids were born, he served in the Pacific in World War II. My brother was in the Coast Guard, and brother-in-law was in the Coast Guard, and I have a nephew and his wife who were in the Air Force. But these people weren't necessarily all around my kids growing up, other than in family things, and they weren't discussing their military service necessarily. But my daughter decided she wanted to go to the Naval Academy and save the world as a naval officer. So the family gathered back to celebrate her commissioning, and then she left for, her choice was Japan, and she served in Yokosuka, and you were probably on the same ship at some point after the earthquake, because she was on the Blue Ridge, which was the flag. That was the flag. So you were probably more on the staff. She was on the staff of the ship, which apparently was slightly a different group than people actually working with the admirals, but. So, and we did get the phone call, not a phone call, a email from her saying, I'm okay, after the earthquake and tsunami happened. And they were all about to disembark into Singapore on a Liberty port. And she had to tell everybody, in her group, get back on. And they went off to basically drill a hole in the ocean with the admirals on there, trying not to get too close to the reactor that was melting down. And at the same time, she also, needed to learn to, qualify, get her surface warfare pin qualifications, and learn to drive a ship in very busy waters, and also keep her people safe. She was a deck officer, and she had a lot of people in her group that she was responsible for that had a lot of challenges, and there were trips to mental health support for the people that were suffering from severe depression and a whole variety of other things, going into the bars in South Korea and getting her people out before somebody got arrested, and things that I never pictured that happening when she was at San Domenico. But anyway, so being on a ship was, from a parent standpoint, we'd like to think it's all safe, but it's not. And I know the situations are different. The training is difficult and challenging. And then after her 2.5 years in Japan, she went to an amphibious squadron based in Virginia, and she happened to be, they were on deployment floating around the Mediterranean while the Arab Spring was happening and Gaddafi was coming out of power, and that was also a very exciting time. She has now left the Navy. She went to business school, and she lives in Seattle and is happily married, and is very proud of her service, and justifiably so, and we are extremely proud of her. Her younger brother, who is 2 years younger, he also decided to go to the Navy, and after a family gathering in Annapolis for him, he was commissioned, and then we supported from home as best we could a somewhat circuitous and injury-prone and long path to his graduation in Naval Special Warfare. He got his pin in 2013. He's had a number of deployments. Actually, one time, my friend Barb's son was coming back from Iraq, and my son had left 2 weeks before to go and replace him. And he's not in the same position, but he was on the same team, and they were going to the same location. The more I learn, he doesn't tell us things he can't tell us, but when he comes back, the more I learn about it. All I can say is I'm really glad I didn't know this while he was gone. I had a picture of him in full battle gear, great smile on his face, right next to my desk, and I looked at it all the time, and you think constantly of this and worry the way Barb described. So a few just kind of snapshot things that go through my head is worry and worry and worry, which of course every parent's job involves that. So it's not unique to being a military parent. I know that the training they do is really dangerous. They don't have to be in a combat zone. The training is dangerous. I mean, the stories kind of curled our hair when we sort of heard about some of the things that particularly our son was doing. And then the fact that they're far from home and far from loved ones. Our son missed our daughter's wedding, and one of the most amazing things at that wedding is my son is married to a wonderful woman who is also in the Navy, and she was a surface warfare officer and is now in a different community. And she coordinated it so that Wes made a surprise video chat with the bride and groom. Everybody in the wedding was weeping. The people that were serving were weeping. We were all so excited, and it was the greatest thing. And it was wonderful. And as that sort of shut down, I just thought that was incredible, but that was awful because he's not here. And it was an amazing reminder, but it was quite a moment. But and they're in harm's way, and that's the nature of the job. And that's just something that you have to you don't get used to. But so what do we do? And so we have faith in them and their training and their skills, and we are supportive in all the ways that we can be. Bill and I send care packages ourselves, obviously for things that we think will be special. And we treasure the times that we can communicate. The odd times we've actually, you actually realize that from this strange base, we're getting a phone call, and it's our son, and we're actually going to talk, and then the call's going to get dropped, and that's the end of it. But we just treasure those times and the times that we're together. And in addition to, of course, my husband and I worry set, and our friends. It's my brother and sister and their spouses who worry and watch and wait when people are deployed, and his cousins and family of close family friends and so forth. But that's just a part of it. So one of the things that I wanted to do, as I mentioned earlier, was I joined the Blue Star Moms of Marin because I wanted to find a sort of institutional way to support the troops. And as I learned more about it, so Gil, can I say a few words about what we do as Blue Star Moms? Sure. Okay. So the Blue Star Moms is an organization. It's a veterans service organization, federally chartered by the national government, but it was started in World War II as a way for mothers to do service while their children were serving in the war. And so they did various service activities involving, helping with nursing operations and things like that, just things that they could do. The Blue Star symbol is something that was actually developed by somebody in World War I, but in World War II, I think there became more of a practice of hanging a Blue Star flag on your home if your child was serving. So there are a number of chapters, local chapters like ours. Obviously, the numbers over the years have waxed and waned depending on what's going on. Currently, there are about 30 California chapters of the national organization, and the mission is to support the troops, support families, and to support veterans. And the supporting the troops, we have, and I think most of the other Blue Star Moms groups take that to mean sending care packages to deployed soldiers. They don't have to be in combat zones, they're far from home, and we want to send some love indicating that we have not forgotten them. And then the family part is as Janice was saying, it's a place where when you talk to your neighbor and you tell them that your child is in the military, that depending on where you live, we don't have a big base near us. A lot of people not have a clue what you're talking about, a little bit as Debbie mentioned. And so this is a place, when I first joined, it was 2000, I think it was 2009, and I frankly couldn't believe it. I went to the meeting, and I swear 30 women stood up there and said, oh yes, I have a son, I have a daughter, that person is deployed. You were probably standing up and saying that about your son. And I thought, wow, Marin County, this is amazing. And it was really, truly amazing. Our group is not as huge right now because I think a lot of times people join the Blue Star Moms when their child deploys because, as we all know, there are probably fewer combat deployments now, but I mean, speaking personally, I mean, my son's deploying and your son's deploying, and it certainly is happening. But I think that in the general population, there may be fewer people, and so that's what draws a lot of people to the Blue Star Moms. But we just had a social event at my house, and it was a group of us just talking about, and a lot of times it's people, their kids are out now, but then you find what their veteran children are doing, and it's some amazing things, and a lot of it stemmed from their time being a Marine or their time being in the Army, and it's quite incredible. And the third thing we do is that we support veterans, and we support local veterans primarily because that's as far as our reach can kind of go. But we have information over there. If anybody is interested in finding ways that they can help as a civilian, as we all are, help support military and veterans, we have a lot of different materials there that kind of explain it, but we're doing, a lot of people think about care packages for the holidays, so we actually coordinate with groups that want to help us. This coming Sunday, the National Charity League, which is a mother-daughter service organization, for about the 5th time, they're doing 100 care packages for us. They will bring the items, we will bring some items, and we will coordinate with them. They will explain how to do the care packages, and then we will take them back and we will mail them. We pay for the postage, so we have the budget for that. And so they're doing that. We there's a church in South San Francisco that did it for about the 5th time, same thing. So we go to coordinate the event, and they donate things, and they make their care packages. We're doing our own packing on December 1st. Any of you who would like to come, there's information there, and you can contact us, and I'll just put you on the list. And we're going to be at the Petaluma Elks, and we'll hopefully make about 100 boxes. If anybody here knows anybody who is deployed, and entire units that are deployed, large units, we really would love to get the addresses. We just need to be deployed beyond like a month or two from the holidays, so that we don't send something that gets sent back to us. So we do, those are things we do, and we also have, for veterans, we have something called Adoptive Veteran Family, but we work with Cynthia Gray, who's at the Marin HUD VASH at the Homeward Bound organization, and Sean Stevens, who is the Veterans Resource Officer here in Marin County. And we've worked with the College of Marin, and we also work with the VA social workers up in Sonoma. And what we do is and there are actually quite a few of you here who have supported us in this program, for which we are extremely grateful, because we could not do this without it. But we solicit the donation of Target cards to us, or money for us to buy Target cards, because the VA social workers have told us that's one of the most useful things that we can give the people that come into their clinics who are in sort of dire financial straits. And so we give them Target cards, and we've had a couple of people have given us literally truckloads of new toys, and we also give those to the social workers and to Cynthia and to Sean. And then we don't select the vets, they select the veteran families that are most in need. And as was mentioned earlier, most people that come back do just fine, but the people who aren't, through substantial disabilities and inability to find employment, and caring for disabled children, I mean, the list kind of goes on and on. There's a letter there that's got a list of just a few of the families that are representative of the people that will get help this year. So what we do is we give the things that we collect, and we package them up in cute little things with the cards, and then we give them the toys, and we let the social workers divide them as they feel it works best. So those are the things that we do as the Blue Star Moms. We are not a large organization, and we couldn't do any of what we do without the help of the community. So as I said, I'm honored to be here today. I appreciate Janice coming as well, and Gil, thank you so much for organizing this.
Thank you, Mark. What I'd like to do is to open it up for questions. We've got some time here, and obviously, if anybody needs to spin off, please do so. But what I'm going to do is hand this mic out for people who have questions, and then we'll have folks up front answer. Yes.
First of all, this was so rich. Thank you so much. So rich. I just want to know how we can bring this to everybody out there. Because, we are now informed, but there are thousands of people out there who need to be informed. So can you help us help you?
I'm going to speak on behalf of Sylvia. This was Sylvia Berry's brainchild, and so it was a co-sponsorship between the Rotary Club of Novato Sunrise and the city. Through Rotary, I think we have the opportunity to spread this here. What I'd like to do is two things. I would like to make this an annual event here in Novato, but I think it's... But I think it's also an opportunity for us to develop this as a template. Actually, when I adopted this brigade and I was appointed as a CASA, the Secretary of the Army came to me and said, can you develop a template for how a community can adopt a unit? And so I did, and that was spread around. So I think we can do this through Rotary, other service organizations, but I believe this type of dialogue should occur in every community. So I think we can start this. And it's a foundation, and let's build on it.
I want to chime in. I just want to say that really quickly. I have already told other Rotary presidents in our district, which is 3 counties, San Francisco, San Mateo, and Marin County, that were doing this, so they're interested.
As a country, we do have a long way to go in appreciating what members of the armed forces do, but we've come a long way already. When I go through the airport wearing my veteran's hat, I hear people all the time say, thank you for your service. I also lived through being spat upon in the 1960s, going through airports in my uniform. And I have a unique family history with the military. My first blood relative died in uniform in combat 182 years ago.
Thank you, sir. Ashley.
My name is Christine Bach Osborne, and I recently learned that one of my family members died in the Civil War through Find a Grave. And I am the daughter of a World War II Navy serviceman and the niece of a World War II serviceman. My nephew and his wife are currently in the Air Force in Colorado Springs, where he is guarding the NORAD facility. In the 60s, I remember when I was in middle school wearing the POW bracelet. And I grew up thinking I didn't want my 3 sons to serve, but now I have changed my mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Bob D, and I want to thank you for putting this on. But one thing I want to bring to your attention is look around the room. Look around the room. I'm 79 years old, and I see a lot of older people here. We're missing the most important group, and that's those who are coming back from the Middle East today. You want to see something? Come down to the Veterans Hospital. You'll see the aftermath of war, of how many men are suffering who have been in Korea, Vietnam. These men who are coming back and are hurting, you've got to get to them now. They need love, they need attention. They need to be helped. You have to listen to them because they're feeling when they come back, they can't be a coward, they can't say something, they can't be a weakling, they want to be strong. And they'll bury what they've experienced. I buried it for so many years, and it's still buried. For 7 years, I've had 5 different sites trying to straighten my head out, and I'm not going to give up now. But get to these men as they're coming home. They need us, they need you, but for damn God, hold them. Hold them.
Thank you, sir. On that comment, which was expressed by a veteran about our need to reach out to these veterans, I did not know how to talk to a veteran or somebody in service. And when I first went over to Schweinfurt, Germany, where the brigade was located, it was supposed to be the hump, the halfway point of the deployment, and we had sponsored a Winterfest party for the families. And I asked that we first visit Landstuhl Hospital, where all the wounded came in from Iraq and Afghanistan and were stabilized before they went on to the United States. I had no idea how to talk to a wounded soldier. And my son and I were literally petrified. And we said to the rear guard commander who was with us, "What do we say?" And he said, "Ask him what happened." He said, anybody who's wounded needs to talk about what happened in combat. I never looked back. I made countless visits to Walter Reed Hospital to visit all of the wounded soldiers coming through, and there were hundreds from this brigade. The brigade lost 109 soldiers and then hundreds wounded. And what I realized and what I learned was it was important to just ask these soldiers and ask vets about their experiences. Don't ask them if they killed somebody. Don't ask them what their worst experience was. Just ask them to talk about their experience, where they served, how they served, etc., and then you'll start to engage. And that, I think, is something important that we want to take away from today, and that is, how should we as civilians, and I'm part of this civilian group, engage with our veterans? And that is, just ask them to talk about their experiences. But also, when they come back, we need, as a civilian community, to embrace them. Sometimes they're in communities, they've lost their means of support, their social support, etc. So we as a community, and we've talked about this at Rotary, need to reach out and help embrace these veterans as they come back. Sir.
Yeah, my name is John Savins, 30-year Navy veteran, combat with all 3 Marine divisions, Lebanon, Dominican Republic, Cuban Missile Crisis. Last one was in Vietnam, 1st Marine Division. I have a chart in my office that shows the rocket belt that we tried desperately to keep clear, but with the rules of engagement, we could watch them hump rockets, but we couldn't get a clearance to fire. And if Pearl Harbor survivor, I've probably been on most of the islands in the Pacific. But when we got assigned to Midway Island, my mom said, you know, I had a cousin who lost a son on Midway. Oh, okay, yeah, all right, so I looked it up. And it was George Ham Cannon. George Ham Cannon was the first Marine in World War II to be awarded the Medal of Honor. And that's about it. I don't talk about things 100% VA, so I just don't talk. Thank you.
My name's Ernie Bergman. I'm the president of the Marin County Chapter of Vietnam Veterans of America. A lot of you may not know we even exist because we learned very quickly back in the 60s and 70s to keep a pretty low profile. So not a lot of people know we exist. We've been around since 1989. But what I wanted to do is I just want to alert the audience about some of the things that we do in this county. And one of the things Harry has talked about, keeping people informed and all that. And we've made one of our major projects what we call the Education Committee. We've been doing this for about 15 years. If any of you have children that have gone into Nevada High School or any of the other high schools in Marin County, they probably have heard us speak because we go into the U.S. history classes, the juniors, 16 and 17-year-olds. We've been doing it, like I said, for 15 years and discuss with the history classes the realities of war and the realities of being in the military. We usually do this in April and May. We probably speak to 300 kids every single year. We do TAM, Drake, Terrell, and not San Rafael, Nevada High School. We've done San Marin once, Marin Academy, and a couple of the others. But what we found out is most of the kids come up to me. I run the program. are you a veteran? I go, yeah. Wow, how many people did you kill and what kind of drugs did you do? And that's the perception a lot of kids have about military. And what we do, one of our main purposes is to create a reality, because we feel, as Harry had mentioned, that if some 18-year-old kid, like I had to do, and all of us had to do, are going to make lifelong decisions, we want to make sure they do it on good information. So I also wanted to, Ray might wanted to do this, but I also want to remind people, tomorrow as Veterans Day, there's a special program that's being underwritten by the Gelati Family Trust. Starting about 12 o'clock tomorrow at the Marin Civic Center, where all veterans and their families is a free sit-down lunch, plus some guest speakers, plus some music. But there's a major celebration for the 100th anniversary of Armistice Day tomorrow at the Marin Civic Center. So just to remind you that if you'd like to come down and meet some fellow veterans, right now there are almost 500 people that have signed up for this. It's going to be fabulous. And anyway, thank you for putting this whole thing on.
Thank you very much.
Fire's over there for Baltimore's event, so pick it up and wait.
My name is Diane Spillman. This touches me very deeply. I come from a long line of military men. My dad was in the Navy on a minesweeper, and he was 18. My husband was in the Army. My brother was in the Air Force. My brother-in-law was in the National Guard. And my cousin Bill, my age, a beautiful man, and very athletic and had scholarships, and he was going to be drafted by the Chicago White Sox. And he decided to go into the military. This was in 1968. We were the same age. At that time, I knew that my cousin was going, and I was too busy being a teenager, going to dances, hanging out with my friends, and yet you would see the war on TV. And it never really hit me. And for some reason, 10 years ago, when I turned 60, it hit me. And I thought, Diane, here you are, 60 years old. Your cousin who served in this horrific war. I remember him on leave. He did 2 tours in Vietnam. We went to visit him. He was smoking and shaking. He was sweating. He was my age. He was 21 years old. He had this blank stare in his eyes. And I couldn't communicate with him that much. I knew he was going back on tour. We came home. I got married, had children. And then, like I say, about 10 years ago, it hit me. I wept. And I was ashamed how I did not support him. I sat down and wrote him this letter. And I mailed it to him. Mind you, this is 40 years after he served. 40 years. I poured my heart out. I asked for forgiveness. I thanked him. It opened the door to a new relationship. I don't know all the medals he has. He was written up in the newspapers. He was one who had lost his dog tags in Vietnam, and there was a couple who was over there and found dog tags and was bringing them back home. And he was one of those who got those dog tags. And there's a picture of him and the look in his eyes as he's looking at those dog tags and what he must have gone through. My passion right now is working with the Gary Sinise Foundation. And if anybody knows about that, what they do for our militaries and the severely injured men that come back, men and women who lost 3 limbs, 4 limbs. They build these homes for them that are adapted. No cost to them, they're entirely paid off. We've met some of these brave heroes. They're amazing. And Gary Sinise himself, a humble man. And he played in Forrest Gump. He was Lieutenant Dan. And he said, well, we can always do something. You can always do just a little bit more. just a little bit more. And if it's writing to somebody from 40 years ago to thank them, then do it. Do it. So I just want to encourage you, there's always something more we can do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Don Bielen. I'm a Korean War veteran, and I'm sorry I didn't take the opportunity to sit with you all here. But we do have some organizations that are available to veterans, i.e. the one that Ernie Bergman just mentioned. We also have a Vietnam lunch group that meets monthly. We also have, actually we have to go up to Petaluma, but we have a Korean War vet group that of course is getting smaller and smaller as the years go on. And we have the VFW. We have no contact, no ability to identify those veterans that come home and welcome them to our facilities. Some way or another, I'd like to talk to you, Captain O'Malley, if there's some way that we can get in contact with them or they can be aware of what we have. We would very much like to support them. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christine, and I'm a resident of Novato, and I really, there's not words to say today. So I think the most important thing, there's so many important things you shared, and I'm not going to give you my background, but what we're looking for in our country right now is a common connection, a common bond, something that we can agree on. And you have provided so much, and you have provided so much to the veterans here. I just really appreciate, I'm not sure what your name is, a woman who just spoke, but similarly, same age group, so pretty oblivious during the Vietnam War, because I was a teenager, even having cousins in there. But anyway, I just want to go back to the common bond and the common connection right now, and that's what's needed, and I hope we can all just go out and spread this experience. Amazing. And I could talk a ton, but that's all I'll say, because this is really amazing. Thank you so much.
My name is Larry Lack. I retired as a colonel of infantry 30 years and 60 pounds ago. And I've been sitting here looking at that banner up on the wall, and while certainly everyone who served is worthy of our admiration and appreciation, I just wanted to point out that there's a lot of difference between the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. And when in my last 8 years after commanding Army Ranger companies, straight leg infantry companies, mech infantry battalions, had the opportunity to work with a lot of the different services. We used to, in the last 8 years, I taught at U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, and we used to illustrate the difference between the way that the services think and perform their duties, as illustrated by how each of the services would respond to the same mission: secure this building. Now, if the Marines are given that mission, they'll come in with their fire teams, move smartly from room to room, and secure the building. If the Army's given that mission to secure this building, they'll come in with a Loach, a light observation helicopter, which will direct 8-inch howitzer fire onto the building and level it. They're always willing to expend ordnance rather than personnel. If the Navy's given that mission to secure this building, they'll turn off the lights and lock the door. If the Air Force is given that mission, they'll try to secure a 20-year lease on the building. And everybody laughs, but that really typifies the different ways in which the services think. And I'd like to reinforce what Harry was saying. We need a far more informed public and electorate. Thank you, Commander, for your service, and I, for one, appreciate you being here, which is probably a testament to really good living or great genetics. But
Run the school parents well.
There you go. In teaching military history, one of the things that most folks don't know about Pearl Harbor is that we attribute the planning and execution of that attack on us on December 7, 1941 to an Admiral Yamamoto, How many of you have heard that? Well, I hate to tell you, you're wrong. That was planned by a U.S. Navy Rear Admiral named Worley back in 1932. He was concerned by the fact that the Navy at that time was putting all of our resources into battleships, and he thought that we ought to be expending far more for aircraft carriers because he saw the future in the air. And he was concerned about the vulnerability of our base there at Pearl Harbor. And so he concocted a plan which he got enough support to actually implement. He took an aircraft carrier up to the north, came in with 32 biplanes loaded with sacks of flour, and on an early Sunday morning, flew those planes over the base at Pearl Harbor, dropping these bombs on every single vessel in the harbor, sinking all of them. Well, unfortunately, the Navy High Command there at Pearl Harbor didn't think that would ever happen, so they just kind of wrote it off. The Japanese read his report, and Yamamoto said, "Damn good idea." 9 years later, we saw it executed. So much for the brilliance sometimes of our high command. Thank you.
My name's Bill McDill, and I would just like to follow up with something that Don said. And I spent a year in Vietnam, and I think one of the most important things we can do for veterans is get them together with other veterans. You know, there's an absolute plague of veteran suicides. Veterans with PTSD now it's out of control. And one of the problems is, we didn't have these problems after World War II in Korea. And one of the reasons I think, and some other people I know think, is because after World War II in Korea, all the guys coming home were on troop ships for a month before they got here. So they had a month with other veterans to sit down and talk things out, calm down, realize they were coming back to civilization and get it out of their systems. Guys coming back from Vietnam, guys could be out in the jungle shooting people, and 36 hours later, they're kicked off a plane at Travis Air Force Base, and people tell them, "Be a good boy." I mean, you're 18, 20 years old. You can't do that. You can't make that transition. And guys coming home from the Middle East, it's the same thing. Encourage the veterans you know coming home to get involved with other veterans groups. And I didn't do it for a long time. When I finally did it, I thought, my God, you don't realize what you're carrying until it goes away. I've got friends, I've got a very good friend here in Nevada who was up in I Corps for a year with the Marine Corps, and I talked to him and I said, "Pierre, you gotta go to reunions and stuff," and he would never do it. He wanted nothing to do with it. And finally he got involved and saw the thing down at the Marines Memorial Center down in San Francisco, and he came up to me and he said, "I don't know why I didn't do this years ago." Veterans coming home, encourage them to join the VFW, join the Vietnam veterans, join a veterans group, get together with other veterans and talk about it. And I think it'll help to mitigate some of these problems with PTSD and veteran suicide.
What I'd like to do is to ask Mayor Friday to make some concluding comments, and then I just want to make one final statement here. And then obviously we're open for you all to approach folks here, but thank you very much for being an engaged audience this morning.
Great. Thank you, Gil, and thank you for putting this together, and thank you, Sylvia, for your vision on this, and for everyone for participating in this. I think it's clear that this is something that we're going to do every year in Novato, and that we want to come together and we want to be part of this. I just really quickly, I was struck by something my good friend and mentor and one of the heroes of Novato, John Salmon, says, which is, "I just don't talk." And Bill, who just spoke, reinforced this idea. And the importance of us doing this and having this conversation and coming together is the courage that you showed today, John and Bill, and everyone else who got up and spoke, is as important and as valiant as anything you did on a ship or on a battlefield while you were in service. And it took an amazing courage to do that, and we appreciate you. We appreciate you sharing your stories, and we need to create more opportunities for ourselves to share these experiences amongst veterans, and also with those who, like I said before, serve every day side by side with their spouse or their son or their daughter or their brother or their sister. And I was struck by one thing that Harry said that I think is really poignant and really powerful, which is the feeling that we all have a responsibility to veterans to be informed citizens. And it reminded me of a quote that I want to pull up that I shared with some of you that's inscribed on the wall of Harvard, the church at Harvard, where hundreds and hundreds of Harvard graduates died after World War I. And the quote is, "While a bright future beckoned, they freely gave their lives and fondest hopes for us and our allies, that we might learn from them courage and peace to spend our lives making a better world for others." And when it comes to supporting veterans and supporting those who we've lost and to honoring them, the greatest thing that we can all do is to continue to serve our communities to making a better world for others. And many of you in this room do that every single day in the programs that you're involved with. Some of you have stepped up to run for office, like Shelley Scott and Lori Fergoli in our community. And there's always a way to make this world a better place for others. And to me, that's the best way that we can continue to support veterans, and those are our communities. So thank you all for sharing. Thank you all for being part of this. And Commander, what a gift you gave us today by sharing your stories. Harry, what a gift you gave us today. And Captain, thank you for your service. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.
I just have two concluding comments. Last year, I spoke at the Marin County Veterans Day celebration, and also made the same comments up in Petaluma later that day. And there were comments by John Musgrave. And those of you who have watched the PBS series may recall his testimony, which was incredibly poignant to me. And I found a way to meet him, and he's become a terrific friend. He, in a talk with high school students a few years ago, made the following statement: "Everyone who serves in combat gets wounded, here and here. Not all of us have scars to show, but everybody in combat gets wounded. Your brothers and sisters are going through this right now as we speak. And only you," and he's talking to a group of high school students, "can look into your hearts and answer the question whether or not this war or any war is worthy of their innocence, their love, their sacrifice. And when you answer that question, you then have to answer the question of what do you want to do about supporting it or standing against it. You have to do something. You are Americans. You have no right to hide from the truth of the awesome cost of your freedom. I would ask each of you to take one moment from your busy day to pray for your brothers and sisters that are serving in our name right now. If you don't believe in God, take one moment out of your day to care for them, because they love us enough to die for us." One more comment, and this is a personal one. I'd like to express my condolences in advance to Commander Long, to Josh, to Barbara, and all of you other Navy folks, because on December 8th, Navy is going down for the third time in a row. Go Army, beat Navy. Thank you all.
Thank you.